Game of Thrones. Like all of you, I'm a big fan of this series. But then again, let's not try to forget Season 8.
You're shit at dying, you know that.
Unlike a lot of you, I have not had the chance to finish the book of A Song of Ice and Fire. Though I have watched Game of Thrones a lot of times over and over again, and each time I watch the show, I come away with different opinions, further formulated perspectives on the characters and the setting as a whole. Very few characters have remained my favorite after the second watch, and even less have become my favorite thereafter if they did not start that way. Like many of you, when I started my Game of Thrones journey or A Song of Ice and Fire journey, my favorite characters were pretty predictable because I really liked the Starks. They seem like honorable, decent people that were unfortunate victims of the circumstances and countless of atrocities. Robb Stark was my man through, and the Red Wedding was by far the most traumatic experience I had ever had the morbid pleasure of taking part in. After his death, I had to find other characters for me to latch onto, and throughout the series, my list of favorites dwindled down to only a couple by the end of Season 7. So that's saying much about how Season 8 really went down on the hill. I mean, believe me, it wasn't pretty. And through this time, I had my eye on Jaime fucking Lannister. He was a prick in the beginning, but he had a quality about him that was really attractive. He was witty and charismatic, but he also had faults. As his story was fleshed out, it became clear that he was deeper than he would have ever let on to anyone that he did not know well. He kept his cards close to his chest. When he finally confessed his true self to Brienne of Tarth, that was when he hit rock bottom really hard, and that was when his character growth would truly begin. And this is when I started to like him. By the time Season 7 came around, he had already became my favorite, taking over my 5th favorite from the beginning of his brother Tyrion Lannister when he opted to leave his sister to fight with the enemy. He solidified himself as fully redeemed. An anime comparison I could see Jaime Lannister, he's like the Vegeta of Game of Thrones. And out of all the character interactions, his would be the most novel of all the seasons of Game of Thrones. Interacting with frenemies who were his past enemies and would judge him for his past while he has to mold his way into the group. His character arc is one of my favorites of all time. Such a conflicted and tragic character. His ending is as poetic as it gets and was beautifully done in my opinion. Definitely bittersweet. The bathtub scene with Brienne and the knighting scene are two of the most legendary and iconic moments in television history. Though wingers and stands can scream to the rooftops for eternity that he was ruined and all that bullshit. But it's the complete opposite in my opinion, because I felt how conflicted he was in every scene in Season 8. And that's the testament to the writing from David and Dan, or D&D in short. And I get it, Season 8 was a pretty bad hit for Game of Thrones, but we're talking about Jaime Lannister. And we cannot forget the amazing legendary performance from Nikolaj himself, because he's the one and only Jaime fucking Lannister I can only see play, and I'll never forget him, to be honest. He was just amazing through every season of Game of Thrones, except for one bit in Season 8, because we all know how bad Season 8 was.
Stand by while thousands of men, women and children burned alive. Would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
If not for yourself, if not for her, then for every one of the million people in that city, innocent or otherwise.
To be honest, I never really cared much for them. Innocent or otherwise.
Smell shame.
And I don't know if this is just me, but I really do like how Jaime Lannister and Jon Snow really do parallel each other. Because to me, Jon Snow represents duty over love, and Jaime represents love over duty. They both switch their stances briefly, but ultimately are drawn back to the original stances they stood for in the beginning, with the opposing view giving them some sort of new perspectives now. Because for Jon, it was his time in the north where he was truly free with Ygritte. He eventually realized he needed to do the right thing and rejoin the Night's Watch. For Jaime, on the other hand, he realized that he needed to help save the world. Even if that meant leaving Cersei, he actually completes his duty and potentially has a new lot in life if he stayed in Winterfell. He chooses love for Cersei over a new chance at life. I mean, call me evil or wrong or whatever, but I agree with Jaime to an extent, because I would screw over anyone to protect the ones that I love so much to my heart. I guess I just view Jaime as morally justified because of my own morals. In the same way, I would try to do what society deems as right, like Jaime doing his duty, but it would fall to the wayside if my first priority was in danger. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Jaime fucking Lannister is a fucking saint, because for sure this man deserves a lot of punishment after all the shit that he's done. Like fucking your sister is kinda fucked up, pushing a boy, a 10-year-old Bran Stark off a tower is just disgusting because he could have been alive and felt all that pain. So again, I'm not giving him a pass. That's why I said I agreed to Jaime to an extent, but not fully, because I understand many people didn't like him and you're not supposed to like him in the first few seasons. Jaime Lannister is a living example of how people tend to judge a regular man just by his common failures without knowing what's really deep inside his heart. And he's known to be the Kingslayer. And the Kingslayer is a lot of things. For 2.5 books or seasons, he was nothing but a rude, condescending, rotten, incestuous, murderous, disrespectful, slick, kingslaying, remorseless man without honor. His first notable action is literally pushing a little innocent child for witnessing him in a wild infidelity with the queen, who's also his twin sister, crippling Bran for eternity, crushing his dreams in the process. Then he attacks Ned's men, injures him, and brutally murders one of them. In a battle with Robb's forces, he kills many of them, including young teenagers, namely Rickard Karstark's boy. Then in captivity, he murders his own kin, his own Lannister bloodline. And then he strangles another guard in order to escape. His interaction with Catelyn Stark still draws him into despicable and unattractive colors, but also for the first time, shows you his way of thinking. He starts planting the dangerous idea of the futility of multiple contradicting vows, and although we don't know it yet, it is the bitter voice of a suppressed and misunderstood soul within him. Through his misfortunate and miserable journey with Brienne of Tarth and the loss of his sword hand, a limb that defined everything Jaime Lannister was, he experienced a sort of an awakening to how low he got, and begins a slow and steady redemption arc. First, he wants to save Brienne from getting away from those dudes, and he saves her from a bear that is intended to kill her, and eventually gives his sword to her that he will retrieve the Stark girls home safely, which he doesn't get to do, which begs the question whether he would have actually done it. But I think Brienne's good influence really has rubbed on him, and he would have. His eldest son, King Joffrey, is poisoned at his wedding. Later, he frees his brother Tyrion despite the fact that he is convicted of his son's poisoning. He then goes on a rescuing mission to save his daughter Marcella from the Elia Sands revenge plot, and finally admits to her he's her father and tries to be the father for once, and only for her to die in his arms. He returns to find his city has been completely taken over by the religious fanatics, who paraded his lover slash sister naked around the city to disgrace her. His only remaining son, Tommen, becomes brainwashed as well. He attempts to negotiate with Brendan Tully, the Blackfish, to spare lives while taking Riverrun, and they cross paths again with Brienne in exchange that further emphasizes their connection. He comes back to find the great sept of Baelor was burned to the ground. His last living son killed himself from the sorrow, and his sister slash lover gasped the vacant seat to become the queen herself. From that point on, Jaime is described as pretty much useless, who's, throughout most of season 7, while in the books, he has come such a long way. It seems his backbone, which is ancient history in the books, only grew in the season finale, when he finally detaches himself from Cersei's poisonous grips. That said, some of his actions are just really irredeemable, unforgivable, and too horrendous to just forget and put aside, which is why the show's whitewashing is extremely inappropriate and infuriating. Jaime is not a great hero. Despite all his efforts, some things you just can't come back from. While many argued he's been punished enough already, with losing his hand, his father, and all his children, which, come to think of it, is tragic as fuck, to be honest. I still think he needs to answer for his original sin, pushing Bran Stark, a 10-year-old Bran Stark, off a tall tower, which is why, if the show brushed it over with Bran being detached, Jon being preoccupied with the war, Sansa being politically polite, and Arya suddenly putting aside her kill list, I will be mad as hell. Jaime needs to truly make amends, not simply rush to the rescue of former enemies he hurt like it was nothing. It matters a little that Brienne loves him and sees the good in him. The bad in him won't go away at all if he doesn't confront what he did and not avoid it. And that's why, for me, Jaime Lannister is a complicated character, but honestly, that's what made him great though. The second the audience is introduced to Jaime, his appearance pretty much speaks for itself. He's a foppish pretty boy all dressed in fancy gold armor with wavy blonde hair while he spoke like an arrogant spoiled kid nobody liked. His fame was greatly due to his skill in swordsmanship. After seeing his duel with Ned Stark, which was really a draw, we learned that Jaime isn't just your typical loudmouth pretty boy. He was indeed a great fighter, which only overinflated his ego. Even as a prisoner of war, his pride remained intact, but this came to an end when he lost his right hand, which was basically his most useful fighting tool. For Jaime, losing his right hand was like losing a gold medal. Simply put, his reputation for being one of the finest swordsmen in Westeros was over. When he lost his hand, Jaime truly learned for the first time what it's like to be vulnerable and to feel helpless. Being unable to fight like he did, being unable to cut his own meat, and having Bronn smack him around during practice was the first stage in Jaime's development. With any character, losing a hand could have only made them weaker, and while Jaime did lose his fighting skill, he began to learn humility from it and was the beginning of his journey to becoming a better man. And being known as the Kingslayer in Westeros made Jaime popular in the worst way possible. Anyone who wasn't a Lannister was essentially an enemy to him, believing that he was a treacherous man without any real sense of honor. However, after meeting another warrior who was shunned by the public of Westeros, Jaime found true companionship. Brienne of Tarth was essentially an outcast and initially disgusted by Jaime himself. However, in an uncharacteristically selfless moment, Jaime speaks up for Brienne's defense, saving her from being assaulted and losing his hand as a result. Shortly after that event, the two shared a tub together where Jaime explains to her how he earned the nickname Kingslayer. In that moment, we learned that Jaime was only a traitor to the Mad King and secretly a true hero of Westeros. His heroic act saved thousands of lives, but he was scolded for stabbing his king in the back ever since. From that point on, a new light was shining on Jaime. As he was not the man without honor we originally thought him to be, his subsequent interactions with Brienne only strengthened his resolve, as he willingly put himself in danger to save her from being molded to death by a bear, and sending her on the quest to save the Stark girls, helping her fulfill her promise to Lady Catelyn Stark. The relationship between Brienne and Jaime was probably the most dynamic out of all the others in the show, as it led to both characters changing from the experience, and it gave Jaime a reason to fight for the right reasons. Because his toxic relationships are always sad to see. For Jaime's case, it was the reason behind nearly all of his deplorable deeds. His unhealthy obsession with Cersei drove him to a deep and dark rabbit hole, where he was riddled with dark acts of violence. So when the season 7 finale came, it was very satisfying to see him finally stand up to Cersei and turn his back on her, even when being stared down by the undead mountain. If anything else, this was the ultimate character development moment for Jaime Lannister, as he selflessly decided to walk away from Cersei and fight with the North against the dead. From the very beginning, Cersei was the monkey on Jaime's back, and it was a long road for him to remove that nuisance. From being a prison of war to losing his hand, building a friendship with Brienne, it all led to Jaime making this character-changing decision and cemented his transformation from villain to hero on the show. Being in that kind of relationship is bad, but it takes guts for someone to get out of it. For Jaime, it was a decision that not only led him to more heroic paths, but sparked another attempt at love, this time with Brienne, someone who's far more ideal to love. But after saying those positive traits of Jaime Lannister, now this is where the best character development in the show went into a downward spiral in just one episode. After everything he went through, and after turning his back on his toxic sister/lover, and even after finding love in someone who's actually good for him, Jaime runs back to Cersei to save her from a certain death, only for both of them to meet their very anticlimactic demise. To be clear though, Jaime going back to Cersei to save her is not solely the reason why his character development went south. Cersei sends Bronn to kill both him and Tyrion, and secretly sleeps with Euron Greyjoy, making her love for him all the more toxic. It's understandable that Jaime would feel obligated to go back to King's Landing and save her, but there was a missed opportunity that would have been perfect to exploit. Once Jaime returns, he is confronted by Euron, who reveals that he indeed slept with Cersei. This would have have been a moment where Jaime's rage could have surfaced, killing him and Cersei in revenge. Instead, he brushes it off like it was no big fuzz and quickly gets over it. Like, what the fuck? We all remember how it ends, right? With the two of them embracing each other as they get crushed by rocks. The problem is that it was unearned and basically ignored all the previous developments of both characters. Like, why was Jaime so unfazed by Cersei sleeping with Euron? Why would he embrace her after learning the truth instead of killing her? Why didn't he realize in that moment that he made a mistake and just let her die? I guess these are questions only the writers can answer, except I'm guessing the answers would be equally dissatisfying. But this part of the video is just me, criticizing and nitpicking why I really don't like Season 8 of Game of Thrones. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the other previous seasons that were just phenomenal in my opinion. With Season 1 being a pretty good start to the series, Season 2 was a little slow but still good. Season 3 was shocking and great. Season 4 was great and the peak of the series for me. Season 5 was good, a few pacing issues here and there, but still pretty good. Season 6 was arguably better than Season 5 for me, with the last 2 episodes really saving the season. But I can't ignore the hold the door moment, the hold the door. Yeah, that puts me to tears. Season 7 was pretty mid for me. Cringe dialogue, pretty bland character writing, however, some good moments, and episode 4 was, amazing, but, still watchable. Season 8, appalling, horrendous, annoyingly frustrating, and overall bad. There, done.
Not really relevant then, is it?
But to answer the question of this video, who is the greatest Game of Thrones character of all time? If you made it to the end of this video, then you may think, oh, he thinks Jaime Lannister is the greatest character. And yeah, he is. Well, for me. But I wouldn't be shocked if you guys think otherwise. Like, no, Jon Snow is the best character. No, Sansa Stark is the best character. No, Tyrion Lannister is the best character. Daenerys Targaryen is the best character. No, King Joffrey is the best character. Wait, really?
Fuck the king.
Fuck the king. Fuck Joffrey. Fuck the queen. There's a price on your head.
That's what the king does when you tell him to fuck off.
And to end this video, who is the greatest Game of Thrones character? Well, that's up for you guys to debate. I've made my point. Now it's your turn. Who is your greatest Game of Thrones character? Is it anyone from the Starks, from the Lannisters, from the Baratheons, from the Tyrells, from the Targaryen? Let me know. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I'll see you soon on the next video. So have a great day or night.
You were the only one who didn't treat me like a monster. You were all I had.